Sometimes love builds a home, but betrayal burns it to ashes. Stay till the end to see how one woman turned her heartbreak into a storm of revenge that shook every wall of the house she built with her dreams. Subscribe now because this story will leave you breathless. The day I bought the house, the world felt like it was finally mine. Sunlight danced on the glass walls and I could almost hear the walls whisper, "Welcome home." I had worked years saving every penny from endless shifts in the hospital, dreaming of a place where I could build a future with the man I loved. I thought happiness had finally chosen me until the evening he stood in the living room with a look I couldn't read. His voice was cold, steady, and cruel as he said, "My ex-wife and her child will live with us." Deal with it. For a second the world froze. My heart felt like glass cracking. In silence I stared at him, hoping he was joking, but he wasn't. His eyes were hard like stone. I had bought this house under my name, thinking we'd start fresh, but now he wanted to fill it with ghosts from his past. I felt something inside me die that night when she arrived with her son. She smiled politely, pretending to be helpless, but her eyes told another story. She walked in like she belonged, touching the furniture, brushing her fingers over the kitchen counter as if claiming it her. Boy ran around shouting, his laughter echoing in the house that was supposed to be mine. I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent. I didn't know then that my silence would become the weapon that would destroy them all. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, hearing their whispers behind closed doors, every sound cut into me like a knife. I decided then if this was the life they wanted, I would give them exactly what they deserved, not with rage, but with patience. Days turned into weeks, and the house changed. It no longer felt like mine. I saw his ex-wife making breakfast at my counter using the dishes I had bought. She smiled every time I walked in like she was mocking me. My husband sat beside her, laughing over coffee and pretending everything was normal. The boy called him dad and he didn't correct him. I felt invisible, but I watched everything. I learned their routines, the way they moved through the house, the way they whispered after midnight. I never fought, I never complained. I played the perfect wife, smiling, helping, pretending to be fragile, but inside me something dark was growing. One evening she asked if I could let her use the guest room closet. I said yes and placed a small hidden camera inside. I needed truth, not excuses. What I saw broke me and rebuilt me. Her hands on his shoulders, his lips on hers. The laughter I heard wasn't from love, it was from betrayal. The walls that had once held my dreams now held their sins. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just watched and memorized everything. I spent nights researching property laws and hidden ownership clauses. I made quiet calls to a lawyer friend who owed me a favor. Every step of my plan was careful, delicate, and invisible. I transferred the deeds secretly using a trust account so that if anything happened, the house would remain mine, completely mine. When the papers were finalized, I smiled for the first time in months because I knew what was. The next morning, I cooked breakfast for all of them, pancakes, eggs, the smell of butter filling the air. I wanted it to be perfect, like a calm before a storm. They sat at the table laughing while I poured coffee. My husband thanked me as if we were still a family. I looked at him and smiled, saying softly, "I have a surprise tonight." He nodded without knowing it would be the last meal he ever shared under my roof. As evening came, I lit candles, set the table, and asked them to join me. I said it was a small celebration for our new beginning. They smiled, thinking I had accepted everything. I played soft music and handed him a glass of wine. Then I turned to her and said, "You know, I used to believe love was forgiveness, but now I know it's memory. Every lie, every betrayal lives inside me like fire." Then I opened my phone and played the video from the camera. The air turned heavy. Their smiles froze the sound of their own voices filled the room. I watched him pale, and she gasped, covering her mouth. My hands were shaking, but my voice stayed calm. I said, "This house is mine. You are guests here. Nothing more. Pack your things tonight, or I will call the police." He tried to shout, but his words died when I showed him the legal papers proving the transfer. She ran upstairs, grabbing her son's hand, and I stood at the door watching them leave without looking back. When the car drove away, I finally let out the breath I had been holding for months. But revenge is never simple. Days later, I found an envelope in the mailbox. Inside was a letter from her. She wrote that she never loved him. Either she only came back because he had stolen money from her years ago, and she wanted to destroy him the same way he destroyed me. She thanked me for finishing what she started. I laughed for the first time in months, realizing how twisted fate could be. A week later, I sold the house, not because I needed the money, but because I couldn't breathe inside those walls anymore. I donated most of it to a shelter for women starting over and moved to a small coastal town where the wind smelled like freedom. One evening, I stood by the ocean, watching the sun disappear, and felt peace for the first time in my life. But as I walked home, I saw a car parked outside my cottage. It was him. He stepped out looking broken, saying he had nowhere else to go. I looked at him and smiled softly. "You already had your home," I said, and turned away, leaving him standing in the rain. The sound of waves drowned his voice as I closed my door behind me. I knew then that revenge wasn't destruction. It was rebirth, and I had finally been reborn in the silence of my own strength. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that touch your heart, twist your soul, and remind you that even in pain there is power.